Hi, everybody. It's Eric Edmeades back here with another episode. And this time I've brought with me a very good friend, Dr. Greg Wells. And Greg, here's what's crazy is, I'm sure it's the same for you, but we go out into the world and meet all kinds of amazing people because we, are speakers and we're on stage and stuff. And then we become friends with people. And then often we become friends with them not understanding who they really are. And I'm kind of making a comment here about, we've been at events together. What country did we randomly bump into each other in?
It was Lithuania.
Lithuania.
Yeah. Crazy.
It was absolutely crazy. And, so we have that experience. But then this crisis comes along, and immediately I'm having this conversation about who are the right people that I can bring in to talk about. My core message here is how do we cope with, survive, and thrive through this difficult time. And I was talking to Sherry Skeens, and she immediately said, "Hey, we got to talk to Greg." And I'm like, "Of course we should talk to Greg." Then our team does a bunch of research, and turns out you're like a superhero. I mean, I knew you were a superhero, but
that's funny.
But it's one of these things that, like, as I say, we get to know people, and if I had been in the audience for all these years seeing you, I would know a lot more. But it's really, I'm honored to have you here. I'm really up for a frank conversation. My core focus of these episodes is, as I said, to help people find strategies for coping, surviving, and thriving through this. And I think where you probably plug in here most is, in order to do any of those three things, we got to take care of our health. We got to make sure our immune systems are operating really well. We got to make sure our minds are operating. So jump in and say hello, and let's take it from there.
Yeah. Hey guys. Eric, thank you so much for having me on. And you're right. Like, we've been at events together, a couple of events, and sat in, the conference rooms for 4 or 5 days and shot the shit. And then all of a sudden, like, we bump into each other in random I don't even remember the name of the town, but anyway, it was in Lithuania. Had a great dinner at some, hotel, and here we are in the middle of a crisis trying to help.
And
people
somehow
together.
Through all that, you managed to, you managed not to mention that you've published 65 scientific journals, raised over $1 million in research, written 3 best-selling books, have another one on the way, done TEDx talk. You managed to skip a lot of that.
All right, so let's do I'll do the 90-second origin story. Competitive swimmer growing up for the Canadian youth team on a training camp in Florida when I was 15, broke my neck, and went through 3 months of traction, neurosurgery, managed to come back to competitive swimming, made Olympic trials and, World Cup level type stuff. All my friends made the Olympics. I didn't, but, sort of that kind of level. Got through university, took kinesiology because I got interested in the human body through all of that. Started a consulting company right after university, did incredibly well in a very short period of time. And then about 2 years in, I submitted a bill to someone at a bank because I was doing consulting for executives at like 22 years old. And she looked at the invoice, and then she looked at me and she said, "What are your qualifications?" And I was like, a phys ed degree? She goes, "You need to go back to school." So I went back and did a master's and Ph.D. Then I did a postdoc at Sick Kids Hospital, another postdoc in biomedical engineering at Toronto General with which involved the U.S. Marines, which was super cool. Through all of that time, I consulted with the Canadian Olympic team as a physiologist. So I worked with over 200 Olympic athletes. Commentated 2010 and 2012 Olympics for Canadian television. That launched a speaking career. Speaking career prompted the creation of a consulting company. The consulting company has exploded. And all of that was, leading right up until Friday of last week. And here we are, and the world has changed, and we're sort of navigating from here. But anyway, that's the short form story. About 60-ish. We got about 10, 15 more papers. My goal is to hit 75 papers on PubMed, research papers. And I was a tenured prof at U of T, still a research scientist at Sick Kids Hospital in translational medicine. So lots of stuff going on, but yeah.
Who knew 3 weeks ago that competitive swimming was going to become a solo sport?
It's funny. Where I was just talking to my buddy this morning. I live on a lake in Toronto, and it's March, so it's still cold. But like, I'm ordering a wetsuit. I'm ordering because I'm not swimming in any pool anytime soon. So we're going to go swimming in the lake and load up on all of the gear to be able to do so. So yeah, here we go.
Okay, listen. Here's what I'm really interested in. Let's start with this. In the green room, right before we kind of went live, you said something that I think a lot more people need to be willing to say. I'm willing to say it. You're willing to say it. You said, I've been wrong about just about everything so far, and I finally kind of woken up to this. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm a respiratory physiologist. That's like my hardcore physiology training, right? So I'm watching this, and I have been watching it for the whole time. And I'll freely admit that when I looked at the data early on, I was like, well, it's a slightly more severe version of the flu. It looks like it's probably around 3 times as lethal, and it's probably higher transmission rates. But I was like, I don't think this is nearly as big of a deal as everyone's making it out to be. And I know that looking back now, I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I could have possibly said, and probably damaging, and it may have actually cost lives. So rapidly, since over the last probably 7 days, I'd say, having consumed as much scientific data as I could, and I'm being very careful about what media I consume at the moment so I don't get caught up in the random hysteria of the internet. I have come to the conclusion that this is quite severe. The lethality is such that if we don't deal with it aggressively and quickly, that hundreds of thousands of people could die. And so my perspective on it has changed massively. My family is, we're in our home. We're prepared to stay here for a very, very, very long time. And we're in lockdown. And I hope the rest of the world does it soon too. And I know that might be really offensive to a lot of people that are, out there. Although if you're listening to the show, probably not. But we've got to do it. And my perspective has changed. And I was completely wrong. Even as early as like last Friday, I was sitting around with a couple of my friends, and one of the guys was like, I think this is going to get really bad. And I was like, I don't know. Now I'm like, it's going to be really bad. And I messed up. I made a mistake. I was wrong.
Greg, I'm with you. One of the things I've been saying a lot online, one of my little catchphrases about this whole event is that the only thing more dangerous than hysteria is denial. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I think in this case, denial is the more dangerous end of the spectrum. I remember seeing Tim Ferriss petitioning the mayor of Austin to close down South by Southwest. And frankly, I thought he was on the hysteria end of the spectrum at that stage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But about a few days after that, I quickly woke up to what was going on. And then I became one of the hysterical people. I posted some things on Instagram about, isolation and about taking care of your immune system. And Greg, no kidding, for the first time, I've had constant Instagram growth for 2 years. I had my first Instagram dip. I lost followers because I was hysterical. Yeah. And of course, since then, I then released a video about what I called your last line of defense. Is one of the reasons I'm so glad you're here, is because I believe that social distancing and all that stuff is the first lines of defense. That's the moat, it's the wall, it's the guards. But at the end of the day, the safe room is your body and your immune system. And I published a video about that. And in contrast with only a week earlier where I lose followers over that same statement, now the video goes viral and 500,000 people around the world are sharing it. It's a different thing. So let's all understand. And I think that the message that I've really gotten out of this, and really appreciate you saying that, is, a lot of people are critical of for example, President Trump saying, oh, it's not that big a deal. And then of course, shutting down the borders. And the left is not helping things when they attack him for changing tack. Now, I'm not saying he's handling this well at all. Right. I'm just saying we've all made mistakes here. And what I think can all get now is the more we all pay attention to the lockdown, the more we all pay attention to social distancing and not contribute to the spread of this anymore, absolutely the better. Agreed? 100%.
I'm pretty apolitical. I'm very straight down the middle. I have voted on both sides of the aisle. And so I'm at this point, I think that, if I look at what Trump actually said, it probably wasn't too far off. The way he delivered it could have been better. Anyway, so that aside, what we just need to do is follow the science. And the science is actually quite clear. We need to be socially isolating ourselves. We need to be doing that because it, quote unquote, flattens the curve, which is a concept that everyone can understand. I don't think that changes the number of people that get infected, but I do think that it decreases the rate by which infections are spread. Therefore, it will enable us to handle it in the medical system so that we're not overwhelmed, so we don't run out of respirators, and so that we can actually treat people. As I scratch my face, which you're not supposed to do anymore, but I'm alone in my
Wait,
house.
wait a minute. My rule is if I'm home, I've disinfected and washed my hands. I can touch my face all over the place.
That's right. Okay, there we go. So I
watch. 3 weeks from now, it's going to turn out that's wrong.
I know, and this is going to go viral because look at these two idiots touching their faces.
Yeah. It'll be attached right to the clip of that one NBA guy touching the microphones. It'll be right there.
Right. So we'll do that one more time, and then that's it. So I believe that social isolation is the right thing to do, and for all of us. So our family has definitely, we are socially isolating. We are loaded up. We got food. We will go out to get fresh veggies as often as we can. We're going to take precautions around that. We are exercising outdoors. We are, maintaining 6 to 12 feet distance from everybody else around me. I run on the beach, but not near anyone else. So we are doing all of that. That is absolutely critical. But then, as you say, the real line of defense is us. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can do to elevate our immune systems in this time and protect ourselves. They're all things that we should be doing anyway. So I'm hopeful that as we all work on these, this is what actually carries forwards after this crisis dissipates. And there's lots of things that we can do to stay healthy and connect with our family. And actually, I believe in emotional connection in a time of social isolation. I think that's also something that we could dig into. But yeah, I agree with you completely on all of that.
Greg, let me ask you, here's some observations that I've made. We're seeing statistics out of Italy where, they're saying that maybe one of the reasons that it hit Italy as hard as it did is because Italy had one of the oldest populations. And of course, so now there's all this well, it goes after the old people. But, I'm more and more of the opinion, and I think more and more people are, that it's not ageist, that it's healthist. That most of the people, it just happens to be that in our culture, because of the way we live, by the time we get to our 60s, 70s, and 80s, many of us are suffering with 1 or 2 major health problems already. And that's what makes us more susceptible. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense. So this, however, I am going to clearly state that I am stepping out of research evidence, and we are now sort of speculating based on logic and knowledge and experience, because I don't have any data from research that shows that about what we're about to dive into, but I'll make a few comments just based on the fact that I'm a respiratory physiologist and I'm a Ph.D., not an M.D. So just so everyone understands that very, very clearly, not providing medical advice here. But I think in Italy, one of the unique things is that it's a culture whereby the young people integrate and communicate and spend time with older people in the population. It's a much more age integrated society than North America, let's say. And so there's a possibility that may have contributed perhaps to what's going on there. But I also think that our immune systems are hyper responsive to our overall health status. Obviously, if you're in good health from a physiological fitness perspective, that improves the immune system. We know that a moderate amount of exercise improves immune function. A lack of exercise compromises immune function. Similarly, too much exercise compromises the immune system. It's a J-shaped relationship. You want to be on the bottom part of the J. Good, consistent, moderate amount of exercise. Second thing that we know is that food has an impact on our immune system. So never before has it been more important for us to be eating healthy food and to really double down on eating the rainbow. Really good berries that have lots of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, eating as organic as you can afford. Like all of these things make a huge difference. Now, I'll actually just draw up something I got from Peter Diamandis in his Future Loop, in which he summarized a few of the things that work. Zinc would be another one, heavily involved in the immune system. And that's one that there's a great Cochrane review on. Vitamin C appears to shorten the duration of colds, not prevent colds, but shorten the duration of colds. There's another Cochrane review on that one. And so there's lots of different compounds that we can consider right now to just incorporate into our lives, but in a very, very simple way. It's just H equals N over C. Health is equal to nutrients over calories. Sort of love that concept. So we're looking for nutrient-dense foods right now, not calorie-dense foods. And then the final piece of the puzzle that we're working on, exercise, nutrition, and the last one is sleep. Sleeping a lot right now. We know that sleep has a powerful effect upon the immune system and overall health. So those are things that we can control right now. We can't control the spread of the virus around the world except by social isolation and taking care of ourselves. So we just need to all double down on our health. And I think we should be doing that anyway. This might just be the kickstart that the world needs.
Do you know, Greg, it's so interesting. When I first started writing, I wrote this thing about the last line of defense, and then I put this thing out on Facebook, and I had all these people attacking me, and no kidding, doctors attacking me, like writing to me going, you can't boost your immune system. And of
Right.
course, then they started talking about you wouldn't want to boost your immune response, and I'm not talking about that. I'm not suggesting that eating well is going to stop the virus from coming in. Anybody who understands this stuff wouldn't claim that, but they might claim that your body's reaction to it is going to be completely different if you're well nourished, hydrated, rested, have sunlight, and all that stuff.
Right.
Here,
So yeah,
New
that's
York
really
Times,
interesting.
yeah, the New York Times I saw just today is saying that, and this is not a nice statistic. They're saying that they're seeing a higher proportion of young people being hospitalized with COVID than in other countries. Germany had the same thing. Why is that? And I suspect, I suspect it's because the young people in North America are eating fast food a lot. And I don't mean just fast food, but not well nourished. And I think we're going to see that. And maybe one of the things that we wake up to after this is that our health is not just some convenience that has to do with how we live out our days. It has to do with how we defend ourselves against these types of things.
Absolutely. And I think that a really interesting thing is, as we start to sort of hopefully vision forwards to 12 to 18 months as we come out the other side of this, and we talked earlier about like, is it actually going to be 12 to 18 months? Nah, I think it probably will. But again, who knows? I've been wrong all along, so I can be wrong on that one too. But we really do need to understand the immune system a little bit better and not take it for granted and understand that it is controllable. And you want the immune system to be operating at the right level. If the immune system is too active, obviously then you get autoimmune diseases, lupus, and inflammatory conditions, arthritis. So when doctors say like, you don't want it overactive, of course they're right. You don't want it overactive. You
Yeah.
don't want it underactive as well, because that's what gets you sick. And so when I'm in the medical world and I work at a hospital as a researcher, and I'm integrated in oncology, and I do like research in cancer and cystic fibrosis are sort of my two areas where I spend most of my time. Where we're sort of landing is that healthy lifestyle prevents disease. And that's very different from treatment of disease once you are sick. So let's say cancer. If I have cancer, many different forms, all different diseases, so it varies. But if I have cancer, I want to speak to an oncologist. I want the chemo. I want the radiation because I have the disease. But if I don't have cancer and I want to prevent cancer, I'm not going to go speak to an oncologist. I don't want the hardcore drugs. I want the sleep. I want the vitamin D from sunlight. I want exercise. I want to be outdoors in nature. I want incredibly healthy food. And so as we build up our capacity to fuel our immune system and stay incredibly healthy in a balanced way right now, it really, if we are not sick, then absolutely we are going all in on all of these lifestyle factors as much as we can. And it's great that this is bringing this to our attention right now, and we get to talk about it in such a way that it's hyper relevant and actionable, and people might be motivated to do it now finally and make this part of our world.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people need urgency. I mean, one of the reasons that we don't, as a population, take care of our health is that the consequences are so deferred.
Right.
That I can eat this thing here, this ice cream, pizza, donut, whatever the case might be. I can eat this here and it'll give me some emotional boost in this moment. And, maybe, yeah, it might contribute to me needing some surgery at some point in the future, but it's so far away. And you know how it is, the younger you are, the more immortal you feel. And then as we start getting older, we start going, ooh, maybe we got to pay more attention. But
right.
Now what's happened is that I think this has been brought right here, like right here today. If somebody decides to go and gorge themselves on a bunch of sugar and a bunch of junk right now today, they make themselves weaker right now today with an impending threat. And so I think that's one of the things I really want to get across to people. Greg, I saw this the other day, and of course it's really tough to weed through the science and stuff, but I saw this about coronaviruses the other day. And I gather they're called coronaviruses because they have a shell. It's like a crown, corona being the crown.
Yeah.
And I heard the other day that they propagate better in sugared blood, that they actually move better when there's blood sugar, like heavy blood sugar. Now, I want to do more research on that, but again, that absolutely fits with everything we've been talking about for all these years. That it's absolutely important that the body goes through these cycles where you go through ketogenic stages where you don't have such heavy blood sugar. So I don't know if you've seen anything about that or if you have any thoughts.
I haven't seen that, so it's interesting. I'm going to go look that up, and that's what's great about these conversations is we kind of prompt each other to go explore things. But back to that idea of how the viruses are constructed. I don't know about sugars, but I do know about soap. And one of the reasons why soap works is because it's hydrophilic, and it actually breaks up the shell of the coronavirus. And so it is a powerful tool for us right now.
I'm going to go eat a bar of soap.
You don't need to eat it, but we need to like lather ourselves. Just kidding. But like when we're talking about washing our hands, like one of the reasons why that actually works is because the soap molecules themselves do actually break apart the surface of this virus, which is great. The reason why you need to be washing your hands for as long as people recommend, 20 seconds, is because if you look closely and really, really look at your hand, you'll notice that there's a lot of like little tiny ridges and deep cracks where it can, and although that doesn't look like too much to us right now, if you stick that under even a magnifying glass, you're like, wow, there's like crevices in there, and that's where all that stuff lives. We need to be washing your hands for a long time, doing it really well, leveraging the fact that soap destroys the surface of those and other types of bacteria, and then washing it off so it completely rinses. If we are using hand sanitizers, leaving them on to evaporate for up to 30 seconds so that all of the surface gets killed. That's actually what we're doing right now. And although I hadn't heard about sugared blood, when we think about soap and its effect upon these these viruses, that is definitely something that we can leverage. And so you mentioned something that might actually make it, help the virus. I'm mentioning something that actually kills the virus. So between the two of us, we're talking about the surface, and there you go. Off we go.
Yeah. So you were talking about like sort of eating the rainbow, obviously because of our work with WildFit, I'm getting a lot of people asking me like, what should they be eating? What shouldn't they be eating? And, to support themselves best. And my answers are typically, look, what humans have been eating for the last, 2 million years is not a mystery. We know what that is. And that's
right.
Probably the safest path to go. It's not so easy for us at the moment. But, do you have any, look, people are, they're not dealing with food shortages in most places, but they are dealing with variety shortages. Yeah. And one of the things that just shocks me is the number of people writing to me going, yeah, the frozen pizza aisle is empty, but the produce aisle is full.
I know.
Oh my God.
Like, so, what are we doing?
If any of our people out here that are watching, because we actually are broadcasting this live as well as the published version, if any of the people that are out there are getting ready to go do a shop, what would you suggest to them? Where should they be putting their focus on what should they walk right past and not even consider to be food? And right. What should they be buying more of?
Well, this is stuff that you taught me a couple of years ago when I was listening to your talk. You spoke right before I did, so we actually watched each other's speeches. And one of the things that you said, which really resonated with me, was eat real food that you recognize as food. Like humans are the only species on the planet that supposedly need a food guide. Like seriously, this is not complicated.
Well, that's not totally true, Greg. Like pets need a food guide, and zoo animals need a food guide. Anybody who's being fed by humans needs a food guide, and 100%. They're the sickest animals on earth.
Yeah, I know. No kidding. So anyway, what do we do? I'll tell you what we've done. So we have loaded up our freezer with organic, lean meat. I don't eat a lot of meat, but we have, got a little bit of beef, a little bit of pork, it's like really good, awesome, healthy, grass-fed, lean, organic beef. We've got some wild fish that we've frozen as well, wild, not farmed. And so that way we're going to be able to get, protein, omega-3s, and keep our omega-6 levels really low. That's what we've done. We have a whole ton of frozen veggies just in case we are actually confined to shelter in place for a little while. We don't know if that's going to happen. We've got them there in case we need it. We've got a lot of good canned foods, again, just in case we're locked in place for a little while. And I believe we will be. I think we're going to be asked to shelter in place for 30 days at some point, and as I think we should be. So we're ready with all of that. However, every single day, it's probably about every 2 days, we're going in and loading up on fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
And we wash them. We bring them back. We put them in the sink. We wash them properly, as you should anyway. And we're we're making healthy meals based on as many different colored plants as we possibly can. Right now, I'm not too fussed about, getting super complicated, but right now, like literally all we're doing is eat real food that you recognize as food. We're reloading with fresh veggies every 2 days. We never go in the middle aisles of the grocery store. Like, you go all the way around the outside, and that's a super simple rule to follow. Eat as organic as you can afford. And there's obviously things that better to look at for organic than like the clean 15 and the dirty dozen or whatever. You can search that stuff and find which types of foods are best for organic. And that's all we're doing. We're eating hyper healthy food right now. I'm not getting super complicated about it. Like, we know the more vegetables you eat, the longer you live. We know that there's 2 styles of eating. Wild Fit really takes this to another level. So I love what you've done, but in the research, it's quite clear. Vegetarian styles of eating and Mediterranean styles of eating are the 2 types of diets that reverse chronic illness and extend lifespan. So in general, that is a broad strokes way to look at this, just to keep it from getting super complicated for people. We just eat real food that you recognize as food, eat the rainbow, eat as organic as you can afford, drink lots of water, don't eat junk. If it's in your home, you or someone that you love will eventually eat it, to quote Dr. John Berardi from Precision Nutrition, right? It's just like, if it's in your house, you're going to eat it. Shouldn't be there.
Just don't have it there.
Just get rid of it. Shouldn't be. If you have ice cream in your home, you are going to eat the ice cream at some point. I know, because I love ice cream. It can't be in the house, right?
Well, Greg, one day we'll dive you deep into the.
Oh,
funny.
man,
I had this person yesterday
Jeez.
saying I'm trying to. They were saying I'm trying to. I'm glad there's no coffee available, because I've really been wanting to quit coffee. And my guide is, if you are quitting something because it's not available, you haven't quit.
Right. Because you're going right back the second that it's over.
You need to have ice cream in the house and not eat it, then you've quit.
Yeah. So it's back to your emotional thing. I mean, the reason why I love ice cream so much is because in 2003, I rode my bike across Africa. We did the Tour d'Afrique. So it was the first ever ride from Cairo to Cape Town. And it was a Guinness World Record setting expedition. I didn't get in the Guinness Book of World Records because I got hit by a cow in Malawi. But anyway, that's another story. But riding through, I think it was Sudan, and we were in the Sahara Desert, insanely hot, like 50 degrees Celsius, 130 Fahrenheit, like insanely hot. My water bottles were like hot. I was dirty. Hadn't had anything cool for days, and I'm riding along and I see a power cable, and the power cable goes off the road and out into some village. So I ride into the village and it goes down into a hut. So I peek into the hut, and sure enough, in this hut, in a tiny little village in the middle of the Sahara Desert in Sudan, there was a refrigerator, and in the refrigerator was some ice cream bars, Magnums. And so I was like, dirty. And so of course I had one, and it tasted so spectacularly fantastic that it rewired my brain to love ice cream for the rest of my life. Anyway, that's the story why we can't have ice cream in the house anymore, because if it's here, there's a little break for us on this show.
one little thing I wanted to touch on, and diet is almost like a religious, it's almost like a religious debate these days. You've got, at one end of the spectrum, you've got, say, the hardcore vegans, and then at the other end, you now have this hardcore carnivore, thing. But one thing that I really want to put out is they are all on the spectrum of a healthy way of looking at food, because if they're really hardcore good about what they're doing, they agree with one core principle, and that is that we should be eating natural foods. So if they're a hardcore vegan and they're not eating processed garbage and they're not eating refined sugar and all that kind of stuff, then they're a lot closer in relationship to the hardcore carnivore who's not eating those things as well. Because at either end of that spectrum, you're fundamentally eating things that humans have evolved to eat. One thing that I've really been doing a lot of research on lately, because I did spend a long time as a vegetarian, is I've been really trying to look at the body's relationship with protein. And one of the things that got to me about this is some time ago in researching for this book that we're working on about post-diabetes, I found out, I just found out that insulin was a protein. And I didn't know that. And so I started thinking about that. So I started doing more research into proteins, because I, like many people, thought, well, protein is your hair and your muscles. It's that's what's going on. But what really got to me is I started looking into immunology as a result of what's going on right now. Antibodies are proteins. Mm-hmm. And so, for those of you who are watching, here's something interesting to know, is that Proteins are effectively complex molecules that our bodies build. And Greg, you correct me anywhere I'm wrong, because
Yep.
you probably are deeper into this. But as I understand it, they're complex molecules that our body builds to do advanced jobs. So insulin, antibodies, and so on. The way our body builds them is with little Lego bricks called amino acids. I think 11 of which we manufacture happily inside our bodies, but 9 of which are essential. We have to eat them.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I think people need to be aware of right now is it is very difficult to get all of those amino acids satisfied from a purely vegan diet without real concentration. And so, you know, like you said, having a little bit of meat or fish even once a week or something, probably a good idea in my opinion. And I hate to push the buttons of the vegan community out there, but I'm just right now, I'm no longer interested in the politics of it. I'm interested in what's going to be best for the immune system.
Right. So I agree with everything you said. So we sort of break down what are proteins. They are, just as you say, they are complex molecules inside the human body. They're made up from amino acids, some of which we can produce, some of which we cannot, and therefore we have to eat them. You can get amino acids from plants. You can get them from meat. You can get them from, you know, fish. There's many different ways of getting them. They make up your muscles, your bones, your skin, your enzymes, which break down the foods that you eat. So they're basically responsible for the structure and function of your body, actual execution machinery of the body. Carbohydrates are the molecules, once they're either complex, in which there's lots of different, you know, chunks of them together, or simple, in which case you just got one chunk. When we eat complex carbohydrates, let's just say wild rice with the husk still on it, you know, that gets broken down, and as it gets broken down, eventually it's in these super simple little molecules. Those are the energy sources for the human body. So protein structures would use carbohydrates to do their work. Vision, swallowing, muscle contractions, digestion, right? It all happens through that mechanism. Fat is basically stored energy. And also structural. So we build myelin, for example, which is the compound that wraps around nerves inside your brain. Your brain is largely made up of fat. Your nervous system is largely made up of fat. So we know all three. And so I don't get caught up in like the high protein. So actually, if you look at it historically, you'll see that there was a low fat craze. Right now, there's a low carb craze. I'm sure the next craze, the only one left to do, is the low protein craze. That's coming. Who knows when, but it's the only one left, so it will happen. I believe in balance. I think you need carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I think that we've learned that certain types of fats are really unhealthy for us. I think we've learned that certain types of carbohydrates are really unhealthy for us. And similarly, I think that there's some proteins that are really good for us. But basically what we come back to always is basically what you teach in WildFit, which is eat real food that you recognize as food. You know, when you were in Africa recently out in the bush with people who are actually really healthy, I'm sure they're not counting their calories. I'm sure they're not counting grams of carbs.
Greg, I asked the chief,
right?
I said, do any of you ever intentionally fast?
Yes.
He laughed at me.
What? Right. I think you also asked him, like, do any of you guys have mental health problems? He's like, actually, well, maybe. I've got a little upset for a couple of days, but that's about it. Like,
that's about it. And then when I asked him if they had suicide, I had to explain what suicide was. And, and he said, and when I finally explained it, there was a guy sleeping in the back of the cave, and he busted out laughing because the idea of suicide was that absurd to them.
Right. And not to minimize it, like it's a serious thing in our society. And if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, like this is a real challenge. We're not minimizing it.
But I think there's a clue. I think there's a clue in the way they're living. And I believe that it has a combination to do with that they are living in an environment that is a match for their adrenal system. They're living in an environment that's a match with their psychological instincts and their physiological needs.
Right.
You know, you were talking about, okay, so there's the low fat craze, which by the way was bought and paid for by the sugar lobby. That they
100%.
They paid for that.
Yeah.
And then the low meat phase and here's the one thing I'd love to another day have a deeper dive with you about is one of the principles that we really hammer home for our wild fitters around the world is that the human body evolved to survive and thrive through seasons. Mm-hmm. And so the body has the ability to buffer things. So the idea of a recommended daily allowance is one of the most absurd principles in the world of nutrition, because can you imagine putting a meal together or a day together that satisfied the full RDA? It's insanity.
Yeah, well, also that was built after World War II based on the average consumption of people in society. It wasn't like for any lot, like it's not based on science, like it's
Not at
just a
all.
random. Anyway, we're not going to
But I think
ignore all
that,
that. It's really
no, no,
not
but
complicated.
I do think that one of the important things about discussing the reality of seasons is that the reason that low carb works is that it's a season.
Right.
And the reason that low fat works is that it's a season. Like, you know, our ancestors did not have ready access to fat. I talked to the bushman just now and I said, are there any animals that you don't kill when you're hunting? And he goes, well, up until recently, no, but recently park officials told them they're not allowed to kill the big five anymore. They're not allowed to kill rhinos, elephants, that kind of stuff. But the hippo are not in the big five. So I asked him, what about hippos? And he goes, well, we would love to, but it's really tough to get them out of the water. The reason they would love to is hippos are tasty because they're full of fat.
Right.
So this whole like this thing of making sure our body gets what they need. It's not like getting what they need every day. It's getting what they need over the space of the month, the year,
right.
and so on.
And that's balance. That's balance, right? So you're right. Spread it out over the year. It's the same thing with stress. And then I'll get back into nutritional stuff because I've got a couple notes I want to run through. But you know, if we're looking for like work-life balance, for example, we're not looking for work-life balance every single day. We're looking for work-life balance over a week, a month, a year. And that makes it actually possible and attainable for people. It's the same thing with nutrition. You're not looking to be, you know, anyway, on any given day, but over the course of a month, a season, a year, we end up in a really good place. We track ourselves over time. And I think that is exactly, it also allows you to change things up. You don't want to be eating the exact same way every single day for the rest of your life. It's going to,
I have to deal with that sometimes. We get our WildFit clients on green smoothies initially, you know, to get some good cellulose and a bunch of other good things. But what we have to educate them is they have to seasonally rotate those things. There's no one vegetable that you should eat every single day because every vegetable, for every great like plant vitamin or mineral that it also has chemicals that are trying to defend it. And so, you know, when people eat cruciferous vegetables for too long, they start getting leg cramps because they're having a problem with magnesium. This idea of there being variety is really important.
I agree. Like that's eat real food, you recognize food, eat the rainbow, lots of different variety, many different recipes, get good cookbooks, try new things out, lots of different spices. There's amazing stuff like garlic, for example, amazing for fighting infections, great for lowering blood pressure, slows down atherosclerosis. You know, it has these amazing sulfur compounds like allicin and stuff like that. Ginger is incredible for reducing inflammation. What else? Turmeric, fantastic for anti-inflammatory uses. Almonds are packed full of vitamin E, which is key for immune system health. Green tea, packed full of flavonoids, which is an antioxidant. Also a great amino acid, L-theanine, which aids your T cells, which we use for immune function. Mushrooms, lots of different types of mushrooms, which you can use. All sorts of essential vitamins, minerals. Like we're looking for polyphenols, flavonoids, you know, all these different vitamins, minerals, which come from all of these different foods. And so eating is one of the other weird things is that people think when they eat healthy, they have to eat less. The reality is when you're eating healthy, you actually eat a lot more. And the variety of and interesting foods you can have is absolutely spectacular. Another one just to throw out there and then I'll shut up is like citrus fruits, like vitamin C, phenomenal for your body. Vitamin C helps you to absorb iron, which, you know, helps your red blood cells to carry more oxygen, which gives you more energy. You know, broccoli packed full of vitamins A, C, and E, and antioxidants, fiber, right? Like there's so many amazing things for us to explore right now. And I encourage people to get out there and to do that and to try that out.
Greg, you and I are so on the same page about that. Now let's talk, I want to go to psychology in a minute too, but
sure.
Right now I want to talk a little bit about supplements. Now, I'll give you the WildFit view of supplements or the Eric view of supplements. The Eric view of supplements is that the vast majority of supplements are sold through scaremongering and ridiculousness and end up just creating expensive urine.
I say that.
And okay.
Exactly. Yeah, same thing
we're
I say.
on the page there.
Yeah.
So then beyond that, the way we look at it is that if somebody has a measured deficiency, not a media hyped deficiency, but a measured deficiency, then what they should do is look for a lifestyle solution to that deficiency. in other words, if they're low on vitamin C, then they should go and eat vitamin C in a whole food form to the best they can. And then if after doing that, they're still having a measured deficiency, that they might then look for the highest quality possible supplement they can get. Does that make sense to you?
I lost you there for a second, but all I will say is yes.
All right.
100% agree with you. Yes.
With that stated, then, as somebody who doesn't typically take a great deal of supplements, I am taking vitamin C.
Right.
And I wonder if there are any supplements that you would support right now for people in the current, just because they might not have the full food variety that they may normally have. What would you recommend, if anything?
Yeah. So love everything you just said. Totally on the same page. I've coached 200 Olympic athletes and supplemented like 5 of them. The foundation is always healthy eating. And if you have a bad diet and you take supplements, you end up with expensive urine, exactly as you've said. If you've got a great diet.
And Greg, sorry, but let's be clear. If you have expensive urine, what that means is you've had to pass that stuff through your liver. You've used up life force to process stuff that your body isn't dealing with. So it's a joke to call it expensive urine, but the truth is you're probably not doing any great. You're not only not doing good, but you might even be doing some harm. Fair?
Yeah. And like the other thing is, you might even think that it's okay to keep going with your bad diet, right? Like it's not going to help you. If you've got a bad diet, fix the diet, then we'll talk about supplementation. So what I've done recently, and Judith, my wife, over the last couple of years, is we've spent actually about 3 or 4 or 5 years working on fixing our diet. It does not happen quickly. It's been a long process. We've been slowly getting rid of things, adding things back in. I think we're in a pretty good place right now. Still some room to improve, but we're in a pretty good place. Then what we did was we both went and got comprehensive blood work done and our genetic profiling. And I matched up, I'll just talk about myself, not Judith. I matched up my genetics to my blood work, and I found that I was low in a few minerals. I was very low in magnesium. And so I take a little bit of magnesium right before I go to sleep, which has actually helped me to sleep better. I found I was very low in omega-3s, which is weird because I've got a pretty high omega-3 diet. And so I did my genetics, and I've got bad genetics for absorption of omega-3s. So I now take 4 times the recommended dose of omega-3s, and that has sort of dealt with that sort of problem. I was also low in B12, not surprising. I eat mostly plants with a little bit of meat. So I added back in some red meat, which is grass-fed. I do that like once every week or 2, and that's basically solved the problem.
As far as I'm concerned, that's still plant-based eating, because that animal ate a plant.
Exactly. It's like, what did your food eat? And that's, what you're just getting in a distilled form. So I'm with you all the way. So let's talk about the supplements right now with regards to immune function. So vitamin C is, I think, a powerful one. And people would argue with us yes or no on that one. But I believe that the Cochrane review on vitamin C and immune function is quite compelling. And it's independent. So that's why I quote Cochrane reviews. There's an independent group that reviews all of the research to summarize it into, what does the vast majority of research say? They assess the quality of the research and also the funding sources of the research to get at something that's hopefully relatively independent of external influence. And so the vitamin C research seems to show that vitamin C shortens illness, infectious illness like colds and maybe influenza. So that is a possibility for us right now. So eat lots of citrus fruits, lots of bell peppers are high in vitamin C. And if you want to take a supplement, that's fine. Another one is L-glutamine. L-glutamine is used by white blood cells. So that is a possibility for us to consider at this time. Zinc is another one to make sure that you are having at this time. Zinc seems to have a very powerful effect upon the immune system. And then the antioxidant spectrum, ACDE, are also important, but those are important for, I believe, for helping the body to repair and to regenerate and to deal with the inflammatory cycle that happens. So that's really what we've been looking at. But I'm trying to get, as you said, all of those through real food. I do supplement a little bit of magnesium. I'm not supplementing vitamin C right now, but I'm drinking a ton of lemon water. I just make water, stick it in a copper, squeeze in half a lemon, and I do that all day long. So I think I'm doing reasonably well in that space. So that's what we're doing right now. In addition to foods like garlic, we're using lots of garlic. We always use lots of turmeric. Cinnamon is in our diet a fair bit right now. So we're just using as many spices as we possibly can to make sure we have lots of polyphenols and flavonoids. And many of the compounds that are great for us, we don't even know what they are, which is why eating real food is so powerful. We haven't broken it all down and figured out what all of those are, but every time that you eat a real food, there's a combination of vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, flavonoids that are present in that food that tend to work together, because as you propose, or as popularize from an evolutionary perspective, we have evolved to use those foods as real food, and there's many things that they do in conjunction at the same time that we can take advantage of. So that's really what we've been doing in my house, and I would encourage everyone to do as well. But the foundation is really just eat real food you recognize as food, eat the rainbow, eat as organic as you can afford, don't eat processed food, stay out of the middle part of the grocery store. Frozen pizza is not doing you any favors right now, and we can do a lot better, and we need to do a lot better.
I'm with you. Really, really good list there, Greg. I appreciate that a lot. Let's talk a little bit about psychology. We're in a we're in a place right now where we're socially isolated and we're locked down and stuff. And humans are social animals, and obviously it's nice that we've got forums where you and I can create a level of connection like this between the two of us, and people can do those types of things. But talk to me a little bit about your feeling about how do we keep ourselves mentally robust during this time, because we're very clear here that cortisol, or generally stress itself, is not good for the immune system. So,
No.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, really interesting. So we'll start with the physiology, because I'm a physiologist and that's my space where I love to operate. So if we think about stress and what it does, so let's say that we perceive a threat from the environment. From an evolutionary perspective, that's like a saber-toothed tiger's coming at you, right? So then there's many hormones that get dumped into your system, cortisol and adrenaline being two. You've probably all felt the effect of adrenaline. Let's say you get startled and 3 or 4 seconds later, your heart starts pounding in your chest. That's adrenaline having its immediate effect. The purpose of that is to prepare your body for fighting or running. So it's fight or flight, it's the response. And it supercharges your muscles, makes you stronger, opens up your lungs, your heart starts working better, your pupils dilate, so you can get all sorts of information. It's literally preparing you for battle in the moment. The other thing that it does is stress, acute stress, will cause your thymus gland and your whole body to release white blood cells into the bloodstream. There's a massive immune response instantaneously, because you're assuming that you're about to get cut or hurt, and therefore you're going to need to defend that space from infections. There's a massive overwhelming immune response in the moment of acute stress. The problem is if you keep doing acute stress over and over and over again, you run out of white blood cells and the immune system eventually gets depressed and we become chronically ill. And so that's one of the reasons why taking breaks and making sure that even in this time of extreme anxiety and stress and fear, we're finding time every single day to downshift, turn off media, don't go on social, give yourself a break. I'm checking the news in the morning and the evening. I'm not checking it during the day, because I found myself losing my mind when I was doing that. Meditation's incredibly powerful right now. Having a meal with your family with all of the devices off is really important. Spending really great time with your kids if you've got them at home, or FaceTiming or Zoom calling or Skype calling with someone, friends, is really, really important. So although we are socially isolated, we can be emotionally connected. And Dan Buettner's work on the blue zones around the world of the communities where people tend to live the longest and become centenarians at the highest rate shows very clearly that the people who live the longest have the strongest social bonds between them, their family, and their friends. We want to be leveraging that right now more than ever. Also, really good research that shows that women who have survived breast cancer have a lower recurrence rate if they spend more time with their friends and have close social bonds. And cancer is related to immune function. The immune system is what fights off cancer. So this is incredibly important for us. So a few things that I've been doing. Funny enough, it's so weird that this has happened this week, but I feel like I've been talking to people now more than ever. This is happening literally because I was on WhatsApp. I was like, hey man, happy birthday. And you're like, hey, you want to do TV? And I was like, heck yes, let's do it. So here we are and having this great time on Saturday morning. And I'm chatting to a buddy from around the world, right? This is super cool. Last night I was on a call with my friends who are all entrepreneurs. And we're talking about what happened to our business this week and how we can turn things things around. Every single morning, my buddies, about 5 or 6 of us, get on a Google Hangouts while we're riding the bike in our houses, and we trash talk as we're riding our trainers down in the basement. And we've actually created a messaging group. Actually, they're messaging me right now. Probably watching this, giving me a hard time. I'm not going to look at that. Anyway, so like there's ways of being connected. Oh, the other one, like my kids are FaceTiming my parents every single night. So that the grandparents are putting the kids to bed. It's incredible. That wasn't happening before. So there's ways of really getting ourselves through this, even though we are socially distanced as we should be. We can still be emotionally connected. And we may even have more time to do that. Like we're not commuting to and from work right now. I've got an hour back a day where I'm not spending driving to and from the hospital. So I think that there's a whole bunch in there that's really, really important. But I think that stress is something to be careful of. Just to summarize it, even though we're socially isolated, let's be emotionally connected. And all of that, I think, will make a huge difference for people through this time. And like I said, I don't think this is going away anytime soon. So we're going to have to get into a good system because I think we're in this for 12 to 18 months. Again, I could be completely wrong, but that's my thoughts today.
Greg, really good stuff. I really support the idea about we can be physically separated, but not socially. I think that's a really big thing. I've had the great fortune because I decided to start this show. I've done a couple of really fascinating interviews. One of the things that I've been really concerned about through all of this is parenting. I remember years ago reading a story about children who were raised during the Great Depression ended up being so messed up about money for the rest of their lives that many of them died with millions of dollars, having never, traveled the world, lived in a nice house. Like they just were so fearful of money.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the jobs that we have right now is to make sure that our kids remember this as the fun time we were locked down for a while, rather than as something really truly scary. And I think we need, and as much as we need to do that for our kids, we absolutely need to do that for ourselves as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So I've got 2 kids, 5 and 9. This is an interesting time. We are in March breaks. They were expecting to be off this week, so it's not too weird. But Monday they were expecting to go back to school, and so there's a few things that we've done, and then there's one challenge we're trying to overcome. So I'll just be radically transparent here. The first thing we did is, I'm a physiologist, so my kids are used to talking about the human body. And therefore, when all of this was happening, and especially more recently, we've been talking about what is a virus? What does it do? How does it work in terms of functioning in the body? So like it takes over a cell, it starts rebuilding itself so that there's many more. The cell breaks, the viruses go everywhere. You cough them out, it comes out through the particles in your nose. Like we've explained all of this to them in great detail so that they understand, like, why are we cleaning surfaces? Why do we cough into our elbow? All of these sorts of things. And they're all over it now. They understand it. And so that's really important because they also understand like why you need to stay distant from people right now. And they're not running outside to go hug their friends from up and down the street. Like there's a deep understanding there. And Adam gets it. He's 5. So it's cool. The other really interesting thing was last night, Judith explained, exponential growth curves to Ingrid. So for doubling every 4 days, which is the rate of new infections at the moment. So there's only a few hundred right now. So it's like, what's the big deal? There's millions of people. Actually, well, if you do doubling every 4 days, you're into hundreds of thousands within weeks. And so that's an important concept for her to understand and to grasp. And so we're just being radically transparent with our kids. And when they understand why we are doing what we're doing. And it's not scary for them. They're like, okay, well, this is just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
However, last night when we announced that Ingrid's school was going digital next week and that they were going to do all of their classes over her iPad, she freaked out. She was not impressed because she does her work with her friends. I'm like, well, you're still going to be they're going to be there. You're going to see them. She's like, looking at a screen's not the same as having, and she's like really upset. And so I think that was like, although I'm like, it's fine. We're just explaining how it works. We're being transparent. It's all good. In reality, I think there is some tension. They are feeling it. And so that emotional outburst that she had last night, finally actually confronting the fact that she is physically isolated from the people that she cares a lot about, her friends. We're going to have to do a lot of work to make sure that connection stays. We're going to have to do some FaceTime calls with her friends. We're going to have to do interesting things to keep everybody engaged and to make her feel like she's connected, right? Like I'm fine. I've got Judith, I got my kids, they're all in the house. I'm great. I'm talking to my buddies over the phone and video calls. Like this is actually, I'm really enjoying myself this week. But for our kids, it's going to be a little bit different. And I think we need to recognize that their little brains need a little bit more support, a little bit more explanation, a lot of exercise, tons of sleep, and really help them to navigate this, because it's a difficult time. And yeah, so it's a difficult time.
Greg, I saw this funny little post the other day. It's kind of cute, but the post said, our grandparents were called up to fight in the skies and seas and trenches, and we're being called on to sit on the couch. I think we can handle it, which is cute, but I think it misunderstands one really important thing. And that is that when you are being called to fight in the skies and the seas and the trenches, or to work in the factories, you are being distracted by a fight. You are being distracted by activity, which is really fundamentally important to humans. So while those people were risking their lives on a psychological basis, they were satisfying a lot of the human needs. When we are forced to, quote, sit on the couch, in many ways, the longer that goes on, the more difficult that would be than having to go work in a factory or go fight in the trenches, in a sense. And I think that that's where we do need to be creative about, how we explain things. Because on one level, your kids are like, well, why can't I go play with the kids at the park? And on one level, you want to say, well, because it's not a good idea right now. On the other level, you don't want to say stuff that's going to make them germophobic for the rest of their lives. It's a tough time.
It is. So I think the fundamental difference that you just described there is, like, when we were called to go, my grandfather was called, my great grandfather fought in the trenches of World War I as a medic. My grandfather was a navigator of a bomber in World War II. So like they were called to do things that thankfully I have not been called, and hopefully my kids never get called to do. But the difference is that was a clear, defined threat. Whereas right now, although we have a clear, defined threat, it's so uncertain. We don't know. And I guess they would have probably said the same thing. We don't know what the future holds, but it is uncertain right now. And from uncertainty comes anxiety, and from anxiety can come fear. And so I think a lot of us are faced with a very uncertain future. We don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know how severe this is going to get. And so we have fear, we have anxiety. And I think that one thing that I've been trying to practice, and I think one thing that can really help people on this, is bringing your attention back into the present moment. And when we bring ourselves back into the present and out of the future, I think that enables us to take control. And it's like, all right, so this pandemic is happening around the world, but I'm here in my house. My kids are in the house. I've got today. It's a beautiful day. We're all healthy right now. What am I going to do right now? So is that like I'm going to go do music lessons with my kids on the couch through the YouTube Kids? Fired up. Let's go do that. Does that mean I'm going to go do a workout in my little tiny room that I've allocated in my house to exercise, the closet? Yes, I'm going to do that. So by bringing yourself back into the present moment, I think it allows us to control anxiety to some extent. And the second piece of that is being very careful of the media psychology effect. Yeah. Our minds are affected by whatever we consume, be that audio, video, or written. And so be very careful of who you are following on social right now. What media are you consuming? What podcasts are you listening to? What magazines are you subscribed to? I just canceled all my magazines anyway, but so that's going to help with that factor. Really be careful about what media you are consuming, and make sure that it's not overwhelming your day. Tracking this minute by minute on the news channels is not going to do your mental health any good at the moment. Obviously stay informed, because we need to know what's going on, but it can be done in a controlled way so that we're not overwhelmed by this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think the staying informed piece is, look, here's my social media recipe that I've been giving people, and they're going to get bored of it soon, but here's my social media recipe. Use Instagram for good news. Unfollow anybody who is scaring you, frightening you, not being useful, or publishing ridiculous canned content that their social media team wrote 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Follow people that are inspiring and what have you. And that's Instagram. So I have a very nice, clean Instagram feed because I'm only following people that make me feel good. Yeah. On Twitter, I follow credible doctors and scientists on the front lines of what's going on, both in terms of fighting it and in terms of researching it. When I want to get informed, I go to Twitter. When I want to, have more fuzzy stuff, I go over to Instagram. And that's the way I've been dealing with it. In fact, later today, I am publishing a list. Speaking, you mentioned Peter Diamandis earlier. He published a really awesome blog on all the good news that's coming out right now around, there are 2 vaccines in development, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be publishing all of those on my Instagram account later today because people need more good news. That said, one thing that I think is really important is, again, it's all about spectrums. And I think that on one level, it's very good to be aware that this is going to, take some time, but also not to get despair about that. But at the same time, what I'm really aware of, and I think this is important with our kids and with ourselves, is not to create false expectations of when this is going to be over. One of the things that I'm a very big fan of Viktor Frankl, and frankly, that to me, that's almost like, if there's a top 10 list of books to read during this crisis, that's one of, Man's Search for Meaning might be one of them. And one of the things that he talked about in that book was people having so much hope that when rumors circulated that the Allied forces were going to rescue them from Auschwitz by Christmas, and the hope would keep them alive. They were working in the camps, and the hope would keep them alive. But then when the Allies didn't come that Christmas, then all of a sudden people started dropping like flies.
Yeah.
And I think that emotionally we also want to have that thing of like, I don't think it's such a good idea to go, look, this is only going to be 2 weeks, or this is only going to be a month. This is for now. This is for now, and we need to just adjust with it being for now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was chatting to a friend of mine from New York last night, and amazing practitioner in what he does. And he said, so where do you think we're at on this? Again, probably this is another mistake that I may have made, so I'll just confess this in front of millions of people online. Just continue to destroy my reputation, but whatever. He was like, where do you think we are? If this is like a basketball game, where do you think we're at? And I said, I don't know. I think probably like where the teams are being introduced. And he was like, what? So I think that hurt him. But your point about like, we should not have expectations about when this, because we do not know. The reality is we actually don't know. And I'm hypothesizing massively at that point in time. And when I rode my bike across Africa, that was a 5-month expedition from Cairo to Cape Town. There were good days, there were bad days. We got sick. Drank Ethiopian local water and had very bad gastrointestinal problems. And the bike would break and I'd be away from camp. Like, good, bad things happened. And I discovered on that expedition, it's been with me ever since, and I forgot about it until you just mentioned this, so I'm glad you reminded me, is that my line was, if you have any expectations whatsoever in Africa on that expedition, Africa will break you, because you don't know if you're going to get clean water. You might not. You don't know if you're going to have good food or not. You might be eating rice. Who knows? Because it might just be all that's available. You don't know if you're going to be able to ride that day because you might get a flat tire. You don't know what's going to happen with the roads. Like, you don't know. So if you have expectations, Africa, being what Africa is, will destroy your expectations. And it taught me to live in the moment and just take it as it comes. And so with this, I think it's a good reminder for us to focus on process, not outcome. And the outcome is hopefully going to be that this dissipates, and we're all going to be talking about this in the rearview mirror, hopefully as soon as humanly possible. We don't know when that's going to be. In the meantime, as we navigate our way through this, the game is process, not outcome. What are you going to do on a daily basis to move you, your family, and your close friends? And if you have a platform like this, hopefully thousands and millions of people, help everyone move forwards. And I think that when we focus on process, not outcome, that will be super helpful for everyone to leverage exactly the point that you just brought up.
Greg, really, really nice sum up. And it very much fits with one of my philosophies, is that I think everybody right now should be journaling and remembering this. And they really should be. There's a huge opportunity for self-discovery and really understanding what happened here. And what I really want to put to everybody is, how are you going to remember you when this is all finished? And how are people going to remember you? How are they going to remember you? Are they going to remember you as generous and supportive and helpful? Or are they going to remember you as small-minded and racist and difficult? I mean, how are you going to remember you at the end of this? And my view is, I want to come out of this stronger and healthier and ready for whatever the world is next. Because here's the thing: that basketball game you're talking about, I want to add to that metaphor. Yeah, the players are just meeting themselves, and it's it's a preseason game and there's a season ahead. And I
Right.
don't know when the quarantine ends within that season, but I will say to you that even after lockdown is finished, this is not going to be over for a long time.
Yeah.
Bill Gates, 3 years ago or so, he warned us this was coming. And that as we push humanity into the wilder and wilder places on earth, we as a culture need to be better prepared for this type of thing. And again, Greg, I really love the way you put it. You and I are so on board with this. The other precautions, social distancing and disinfecting and washing are all incredibly important. But I don't think any of those could actually be more important on an individual basis than being healthy. And I'm so glad you came here to share your ideas about that. Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Eric. Like, it's awesome to be here. We're on the same page. Let's keep doing this. I would love everyone listening to this show to take what you just said to heart and be like, how are you going to remember you through this? Are you going to be positive, constructive, helpful, supportive? And if you push that out into the world, it's going to come back at you in droves. So this is our opportunity. It's going to be tough. And I'm not saying we don't want to minimize some people who may be sick or may get sick. We are going to help those people too. And we're all going to get through this together. And I couldn't be more honored and privileged to be on your show. So thanks for spending your Saturday morning with me, buddy. Appreciate it.
No worries at all. Thank you for making the time. Everybody, you guys can absolutely connect with Greg at drgregwells.com. You can find out more about him and what he does. And he's also here on Facebook. I tagged him in the comments earlier. Greg, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, buddy. Good to see you.